Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 181 of Studio Biz and all that jazz. Can you believe we've come this far? It is almost Christmas, for goodness sakes. That is insane to me. Now, today I have a very special guest by the name of Mike Harrison Lamond. Now, I actually met Mike at the Australian Dance Festival this year in 2024, and we were both speakers and presenters at the event, and it was just really cool to meet someone who's got such an eclectic experience in the dance industry. He's not only a studio owner of Academy of Dance, where he, is a co-director with his partner. And that is a studio that went, by the way, from 200 students to over 1,000 students. So we're going to talk about that. He's also the owner of a uniform company called Calibrate. So uniform and accessories. We're going to talk about that as well. Plus, he's an advocate for the dance industry with his work in the organization, not-for-profit organization called Dance Arts Alliance, where he is the vice chair. And he has some, very interesting, insightful opinions on the direction that teacher wages and staff wages and the award rates are going here in Australia. So we're going to really talk about that as well. It's a mixed bag with Mike, and I love that so much. And that is why this episode is called, with a little bit of a fun twist added to it, because, we've got the whole Wicked thing going on at the moment, but it's called Uniform, Staff Wages and Dance, Oh My, with Mike Harrison Lamond. Now, just before we kick into the show, I wanted to let you know that he is the director of the Australian Academy of Dance, as mentioned, and they've built that school, him and his partner, Nathaniel Harrison Lamond, together over the past 15 years. He also has a background in design and communication, having worked for firms in Australia, the UK and Canada, and has also done extensive work for all levels of government and not-for-profit and NGO sector. Now, he's always had a passion for the arts and has been connected with the industry from a very young age, having performed in a number of shows and then becoming a designer to more recently producing and staging shows. Now, him and his partner Nathaniel took over a 15-year lease on 2 buildings and went through a 6-month process to create new dance studios to train in. And so this is a very exciting thing because they went on to then, set up a black box theatre and a training ground for their students in their local arts community. So this is very, very cool. So like I said, that eclectic experience. And it is Mike's dream to have a performing arts venue that is run by artists for artists and for it to become an ongoing part of the local arts landscape. Now, while Mike comes to Dance Arts Alliance, and that's something we're going to talk about from a different path than the other members, his experience working with the arts industry and his advocacy work inside and outside government has helped him provide support to the group. So this is very, very cool. Now we're going to talk about not only Dance Arts Alliance, his work there, we're going to talk about studio ownership, uniforms, oh my, and so much more. As we move down the yellow brick road with Mike Harrison Lamond. Let's jump into the show. Hello and welcome to Studio Biz and all that jazz. I'm your performing arts business coach and host, Josephine Lancuba. This show is designed to bring you inspiration, information, and the instruments you need to create and grow the studio biz of your dreams. I will bring you a mix of solo episodes as well as interviews where I tap into the minds of industry experts. My career started as a performer over 2 decades ago. I later became a speaker, theatrical producer, and talent manager, as well as having a successful teaching career in singing, drama, and dance. 10 years into my professional journey, I became a mama of 2, and with a baby on my hip, opened up my very own performing arts studio. From hardship and humble beginnings to 4 studio locations and a multi-6-figure performing arts biz, I know how to attract students and keep them coming back for more. And in the show, I will share with you my experiences to help you thrive and fast-track your path to success. I know you have a spark inside of you with dreams and goals for the future. As your coach and mentor, I'm here to help you step into your limelight and be a cheerleader in your ear each and every week. So get ready to be entertained and inspired as we talk studio biz and all that jazz. I'm very excited to have on the show today Mike Harrison Lamond. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Yeah, it's so great because we met at, I believe it was the Australian Dance Festival. That was the first time. And it was wonderful because we were both speakers and we were both presenting there at the event. And I loved everything that you had to bring to the conversation around culture, studio life, and you've got so many different facets of the industry that you're amongst. And so that's why I wanted to have you on the show. We are talking everything from dance, we're talking uniforms, we're talking staff wages and the awards industry here and the awards here in Australia. So we're going to talk about all the things. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for everyone listening today, but that's what I love about Mike because you've got so much industry experience. So let's talk about where that all started. Now, first and foremost, what would you say is the front runner when it comes to your businesses? You know, you're a part of, well, you're the vice chair of Dance Arts Alliance. You've got the Academy of Dance. You're a co-director there, and you've also got Calibrate. What's the front runner? Like, where do you spend most of your days?
I really bounce between projects, and I think for me, I really enjoy that. Every day is different on my calendar. 2 weeks ago, I was hanging out with Minister Colin Brooks and Paul Mercurio with the Chair and Secretary of Dance Arts Alliance, advocating for a safer environment for Victoria for children. Yesterday, I was presenting to investors around what we're doing in Calibrate. And then on Sunday, we had our preschool concert at the dance studio. So every day is exciting, but it's all tied together around, the work in the industry. The foundations are setting up to make sure we have a really good support to make sure our businesses have a future, working in the business itself. And then Calibrate all got started from all the work we had done in the studio and making that available to other studios around Australia. So it really fuels me just to keep bouncing between things. It's really exciting, and it's all as equally valued as each other in my eye.
Yeah. And were you studio owner first? Is that where it kind of started from? Were you a dancer yourself? Like, where did it all start, this passion for dance?
I've had a long connection with the arts. I used to perform in my younger days in amateur theatre. I used to sing with friends. I've worked in the arts, but I really got into this when I met my husband Nathaniel back in 2010, and he was running a studio out of an old church hall, and I just got involved doing some small things to help him along while I had my own business in marketing communications, and then as the business has grown from a couple of hundred students to over 1,000, it's taken up so much of my time, but I really love it because everything that we do, all our successes in our business, and most studio owners are like this, we put back in to growing the business and making it bigger and better for the kids.
How did you go from a couple of hundred students to over 1,000? And I know there are so many moving parts to that story, but if there are, mainly studio owners are listening to this podcast. So if there are any key things that supported that growth, what would you share?
I would say culture is key for the success of a studio, and it all starts from the top, from you as the director. I think we spend so much time thinking about how we can make it better for the children, for the parents, but it's really about truly understanding what their needs are, and being able to detach somewhat from your work personality and your private personality. I think a lot of us take things to heart all the time, when parents are critical about the things that we're doing. But for me, I've always said to parents, I actually appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about things. Sometimes the feedback is ludicrous, but you hear them, you listen to them, and they felt like they're being heard. But a lot of it is around, that culture. All of our teachers have got a really low staff turnover. I think the average is over 5 years plus of people that have been in our organisation. We've had teachers that have come through from the age of 3 all the way through have graduated and are teaching for us, and it's brilliant for us because they understand what we represent, what our values are, and they sort of are able to reflect those into the studio. So for me, it's all about the culture and making sure it's a really positive, constructive environment to be in.
Your background in marketing, though, would be helpful, I imagine.
It has helped. I've had quite a lot of jobs. I've done work, yes, in marketing communications. I've done work as a graphic designer, as a branding expert,
Yeah.
in film photography, and it's the one job, working in a studio where you can bring all those skills together. And
Yeah.
then Nathaniel's got a really strong background in the training, education,
Yeah.
the syllabus work and development. So it works really well for us.
I
And
mean,
there are
you did
studios
say
that have
something
two.
awesome. You did say something awesome about teachers, which is, the turnover is small. And I think that is a testament to culture. And essentially, like, our teachers are the face of the business. You
100%.
know, we are, of course, there's a personal brand behind the director and all that sort of thing. But really, when they walk into that classroom, it's about the teacher, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I just think that that's a really important piece of the puzzle. But I do imagine as well the scope of when we talk about marketing from when you first started in marketing to now. I mean, I imagine that's developed and grown so much. How do you keep up with the changes in the marketing, landscape and how it's changed so much since when you first started in the industry?
I think it's really important as studio owners to always be on a learning journey. I think we can't be egotists and say, I know everything. So I'm always open to learning new ways to do things, whether that's through sort of formal training or most of the time it's just seeing sort of what's trending, what works, listening to people like yourselves at conferences talking about particular things. There were great sessions about social media at Australian Dance Festival. It's just about being open to trying new ways to do things. And I think what really works for me is always asking for feedback, whether it's from the team that you're working with. How did that go for you? Was that easy to implement? How, what the feedback is from the parents and the students, the people you are talking to. And I think it's just coming from an approach of being authentic in your marketing. Um, there's a main difference between marketing and communication. Often marketing and advertising sort of sit in that same category of trying to sell something or push something that perhaps people don't need or don't think they need. Whereas communication is a lot more about the factual information, and education. So it's about, not being dishonest in what you're trying to do to grow and to bring more revenue in. But it's about sort of like having that really good approach, that it's a win for all.
Yeah. And with Calibrate, I imagine that would have come much later into the story of the business. Like, how did that come about? And what is Calibrate for everyone listening, just so they understand?
Sure. Calibrate is a new business. We started it about a year ago.
So it's very new.
It is very new, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a joint venture with another organisation, and it's been developed because we've been manufacturing our uniform for nearly 10 years now. And, uniform, aside from classes, is the number one revenue for us. So we sell about $100,000 of apparel and shoes into the studio each year. So for us, it was like, well, we've got this really great uniform. Why not actually be able to promote that out to other studios? And I think there's been a really fundamental shift in the attitude between studios since COVID. Obviously, it was a very traumatic experience, but I've connected in with so many studios since COVID, and it's gone from being very siloed to then people are open to collaborating and wanting to find out more about particular things. I'm like, well, why wouldn't we, have this uniform go around Australia that people can access, or the syllabus that we teach that we're about to launch that have books and videos to go with them. Or the business services. We've got people that do HR and payroll, invoicing, everything that actually is done in your business in the studio. We can actually then help, whether it's a product or a service. Because at the end of the day, you want to bring in more revenue and reduce the administration costs of running your business. And by bringing in experts to help you do that, it's going to succeed and help you from day to day.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, we didn't have a big revenue stream per se in the uniform department. We're musical theatre, so it was just like a t-shirt and shoes, really. It wasn't
Yep.
tights and leotards and the extras, but we did sell shoes.
Mm.
And yeah, it was a great seller. And so I was like, wow, these shoes just fly off the shelf. And I think it's because it's easy, because people don't want to have to go and travel into the stores and do, like, if it's there and if that's uniform and they need it, then why wouldn't they buy from you?
Yep.
Even if it is a slight markup from what they might go into the store and buy or whatever. Yeah, it was such a great seller. So I think that's definitely something that people can um, take into their business and think about all of those different things that they just give away to some other provider. There's so many
I
opportunity for revenue, isn't there? And we
100%.
just palm it off to someone else. If only we
Yeah.
brought a few of them in-house, doesn't have to be everything, but things like uniform make sense, you know?
Yeah. And there are some great dancewear stores around, but at the end of the day, they're all a business and they're not going to give you any kickbacks. They might give you like a teacher discount, but we used to send 400 kids down the road to the local dancewear shop and we got nothing for it. And that's when we sort of twigged about 10 years ago, hang on, we can actually bring that revenue into our studio. And then we still use dancewear stores for things like, character skirts and shoes and point shoes and things that, are more, there's like less demand for them. And we don't have to stock everything in the studio. But parents love a one-stop shop where they come in, they've got everything. And the way that we do it, we don't hold a lot of stock on site. We just have minimum quantities and then we just like bring in more as need be.
Yes.
And it's taken a long time to get to that point, but I love talking to studios about how we can, outfit their business, but make it a sustainable way so they're not spending massive amounts of money to get in a whole lot of uniform. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of advantages for doing that.
Well, we've got your Calibrate backpack at home. My husband wears it all the time. That's his
Oh,
go-to
great.
backpack now. It is. He loves it.
He's a
Okay,
walking billboard.
so let's talk about Dance Arts Alliance. So this is one of the reasons why, well, this is the big reason I invited you onto the show, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about your journey up to here because, you know, Dance Arts Alliance is filled with people filled with, so much experience and industry knowledge and really they're advocating for the industry. But I felt like it was important to talk about the origin of you. But yeah, you're the vice chair and I want to know a little bit more about it and maybe explain to everyone at home why Dance Arts Alliance exists and what it's all about.
Okay. Dance Arts Alliance started in April 2020 when we realised that we weren't having a voice advocating for us into government. There are other organisations that work with government, but they're all funded by government. So,
Yeah.
there was no criticism about, the restrictions that we had in Victoria, where our businesses were placed alongside brothels in terms of risk, which was ludicrous. I've
Really?
always said, I know,
That's
I've
crazy.
always said that the government does not understand the fundamentals of what we do in dance performing arts studios. So we were the first industry to close, the last to reopen. So we really garnered support through the other studios. We were writing press releases most days. We had journos working with us, going out to the press conferences at the premiere and saying, it makes no sense that full contact sport is now back. Why can't socially distant dance classes happen? So it all started from the need to have urgent critical support for studios in COVID. And then since then, we know how fragmented and how unsafe our industry is, being unregulated. So a lot of the work that we do is around child safety. So for all Dance Arts Alliance studios, they need to have accreditation standards. So all members they're working with children checks, they have fully compliant public-facing child safe policies, they've got licensing, they've got insurance. And then what we do is we're a member-based organisation. So every dollar we get in is only from members, we're not funded, goes back into providing training and support for studio owners. We market to Australian families to say, we're an unregulated industry, you need to make sure your children are safe. So talk to your studio about what they're doing, but also you can find your local accredited Dance Arts Alliance studio. We have been working with the Minister for the Arts of Victoria. We met with him 2 weeks ago and just talked to him about what we do. Paul Mercurio is an MP and he's been a great advocate for us to get in to talk to government. So we now have members. We started in Victoria, but we now have members around Australia.
May I ask how many members you have now? Like how
At the moment, I think we've got about 120 studios. And
really
that's
great.
yeah, yeah. And every dollar goes back into supporting our industry. And the key thing for me is that all of our board members are all studio owners. They are volunteers. There's a lot of work to be done. But I think what's really been fundamentally wrong with our industry is we have organizations that aren't dance studio owners making decisions on our behalf. And they say they're doing consultation processes, but it's really not aligning with what the actual true sentiment of studio owners are. So the more studio owners we have and dance teachers in our membership, the more influence we can have into government. And there's so much on our list of what we want to do. So, we all understand that sport gets a lot more funding than we do. But because
it's different to Oz Dance in a lot of ways, it sounds a bit different because it's probably a bit more business focused rather than
so
dancers. This is about the business of dance, I suppose.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment? Yeah,
that's correct. So Oz Dance sort of say they're the big body for the industry, but their focus is very much on the professional dancers and the companies. This is what I said to the minister the other day, is that we are only looking after studios that have children from the age they can start dancing all the way through to year 12 and then full time. So it's all the training cohort. That's what we look after as Dance Arts Alliance. And then Oz Dance are very focused on the professional and the performance career side of work.
So there's a place for both, and there needs to be both, really, doesn't there?
I do think that, yes. Oz Dance do say that they have connections into studios, but you can't be one body looking after an entire industry effectively. So this is where our focus is. And it's really about making sure that the people who run the direction and the strategy and the future of that are the studio owners. And often they're the dance teachers anyway. So studio owners and dance teachers are really needing to have a lot more voice into government. So we asked the minister about, support for reduction of theatre hire. So a lot of theatres are either council owned, state owned, or they have non-profit status, so they can get donations in from government. So there's a lot of things you can do to support studios day to day in the work that they're doing. And you know how expensive it is.
It's so expensive. I don't care where you are in the world. I think theatre costs are just exuberant. Studio Biz Summit is the conference of the year, and it's happening in Sydney on International Dance Day in April 2025. You will be inspired, educated, and supported by an amazing community with masterclasses, a catered lunch, live entertainment, a glass of bubbles, and so much more. This is not only a conference event, but also a celebration of International Dance Day, bringing our community together. Grab your early bird tickets now. Head to josephinelancuba.com/summit. I'll put the link in the show notes and your special discount code. See you there. I mean, just in the last month or so, 3 Australian, quite popular, well-known theatre companies have closed down because they just can't afford to continue operation. It's very sad, and these are much-loved theatre companies that are just shutting their doors. And I do believe it's just the cost of everything, from the effect of inflation. We've got staffing costs and all that jazz, but then that theatre cost is just the nail in the coffin, isn't it? It's thousands of dollars a day, and it's just ludicrous. How are you supposed to make back that? We're not the Capitol Theatre charging $200 a seat either. That's the other bit. So you can't charge a parent to come and see their 4-year-old $150 for a seat at the theatre. No. It just doesn't work.
And the other thing is that we had this massive black hole between sort of the middle of December and the end of January. There may be holiday programs, but a lot of the time for our studios, it's full commercial rent for that 6 weeks that concert has to fund, plus any staff that are on part-time or full-time costs as well. So
Mm.
critical that you come out of a show at the end of the year and have enough money to then get you through to term one. And we shouldn't be having to operate like that. We should be rewarded as studio owners because we provide the platform for pretty much every Australian star of stage and screen, plus teachers, plus choreographers, lighting designers. Like everyone gets their start, pretty much everyone gets their start at a studio in dance and performing arts. So why aren't we funding that and supporting that to make sure that we have a future for the next generation?
Yeah, absolutely. And with these rising costs, we've talked about theatre, and staffing. And I know that there is a lot of chat at the moment, and there's been some conversation in, the industry Facebook groups, whatnot, which you've also been contributing to around the award rates here in Australia and how there may be shifts and changes. Can you talk to us about that and, what your point of view is around the potential changes to the awards or the increases and why you're part of this conversation?
Sure. So Dance Arts Alliance are really keen to make sure that we have the proper operating environment. Now that we've done the child safety work and the safe dance practice, it's about the framework in which we operate. And a large part of that comes under the award. As you know, we come under the fitness award at the moment, which is
Fitness industry award, yeah.
very gym and swim focused. And you're trying to employ someone, you're looking at the levels like, okay, well, level 3 is someone who can do a swim
Blow
class.
bubbles.
Yeah, supervision. It makes no sense at all.
Blow bubbles in a pool and do freestyle without a
I
supervisor.
know. But from our point of view, we're like, well, what's someone's level if they're answering the phone in the studio, and what's their level, the same person, if they're then in the theatre looking after 20 kids that are in their soul care backstage? We need to have an award that works for us. Now, we've started a consultation process, and we've had probably about 100 teachers and studio owners contribute so far. But our plan is to go to Fair Work Commission early next year and say, we need an award that represents dance and performing arts education. And here's the consultation process we've done. Here's our recommendations. And then Dance Arts Alliance are also going to do a big piece of work on top of that to say, here's how you use the award in your studio. So the thing is, the actual award rates are unlikely to go up a lot because it affects a lot of other industries around Australia. So if we say we're now all on this particular rate, we all understand that the fitness award rates are really, really low. But what we can do is we can do some work on top of that to say, well, here's some banding that studios have contributed to say that with these this qualification and this experience in this location, whether it's rural, regional, or metro, this is like the sort of banding of operations that you would expect. And that will help someone in full-time to know what they're likely to do when they come out of training. And it's someone who is in a studio can actually make a bit of a plan from a budget perspective. Okay, I'm going to bring in an elite manager who's got 10 years experience, great qualifications. They're probably going to be on this lot per hour. And then someone who's going to be an assistant will be on this. So it's actually helping people to make a plan for that. So that was our big plan to go to Fair Work. And then we sort of got word that MEAA and AusDance were talking about moving us into Live Performance Award.
Doesn't really fit because, I'm a talent agent representing artists, and we obviously look at the Live Performance Award quite regularly, but it is exactly as it says. It's about live performance. It's not really
no, it's ticket sales,
aligned
it's ushers,
to education.
roadies. Yeah, it's people that are actually on stage, which is a very small part of what we do. We would argue that we're an education and training organisation of what we're doing within our capacity. So you've got MEAA who are saying we've got something in front of Fair Work Commission that we're going to be moving to Live Performance Award, and AusDance is saying no, that's not going to happen. But I'm like, well, where are studio owners in this conversation? Where's
the payers?
Yeah, exactly. So our whole thing is making sure that we have a future, and even if the commission are saying we're not wanting to have a new award, we're saying we are a substantial industry. We have 4,000 plus studios around Australia. We employ probably 10 to 20,000 people. But Australia-wide, we contribute a lot to the economy. So we shouldn't be put in with swim schools and gymnasiums in terms of the work that we do.
Isn't
So
there a risk though, and I'm just putting it out there because I always like to play devil's advocate, but isn't there a risk though if we start playing with the fitness industry awards? You did say it's a lower rate, but at the same time, that's great. We want people to be paid more, etc. But the business owners, especially at this time, can't really afford high level awards. So what's the conversation around that? Because it would potentially bump the minimum quite substantially. Would that be a fair statement?
yeah, well, the level seven is, I think, about $37 to $39 an hour. I have quite, tough love conversations with a lot of studio owners that many of them have sort of fallen into a business where they've taken over. They're a teacher and the principal's retired. They've got the school. They don't have a lot of training in business. And,
Mm.
this is what we got back to before about you always need to be improving your skills and abilities within the way that you run your business. Um, there are some studio owners who are doing amazing things out there, but there are studio owners who are refusing to actually pay teachers for their time and their worth and value. So, as I said, teachers are there at the front lines. They're dealing with children all the time. They are the face of your brand, and it needs to be that you invest in them and you support them. So I know that there are teachers that aren't being paid to go to any events like competitions or
Yeah, and
concerts.
that's not right.
There are teachers that aren't being paid superannuation.
Mm.
There's the entitlements that teachers need to have, but there's also the realistic expectations when someone's coming out of full time and coming to apply for a job with me that they're not coming in saying I'm on $60 an hour. I'm like, okay, well, you are basically finished your training and they want to come and do master classes in my studio. I'm like, but this is not your work. You're not a master in this. This is someone else's work. You're basically just passing off
I'm
as your
glad you said that because that is an opinion that I also share. And so that's not your point of view. You're not saying let's all bump everyone to $60 an hour. There are definitely levels to this. And graduating from full time doesn't mean that you're qualified to teach or have the experience. You might be a great performer and a great dancer, but you have some learning to do, right? And that is in the classroom.
Yes, because you're a great teacher doesn't mean you're sorry, because you're a great performer doesn't mean you're a great teacher. That's a
Mm.
very, important thing to understand. But it's making sure this consultation is for studio owners and for teachers and for stakeholders. So people who are RTOs, parents, people who actually interact with our industry about, the input we want to have from them as well. And it's again finding a realistic balance of making sure teachers are paid for what they're worth and what they're bringing in terms of their work in the studio, but also being able to make sure that we have sustainable businesses into the future.
Mhm.
Um, but as I'm saying, if you have the guide, if you have all this information, you can sit down at the start of the year or even September the year before and do your budget, do your planning, work out how many kids you'll need in the studio, what you need to price it at, and actually make some informed choices. But trying to do that in the fitness award where the top finishes at like, $37 an hour doesn't make any sense for someone who you want to bring in as a manager. So it's making sure that we talk more broadly across our industry, but we, the people who work in the industry, are running that, and not sort of other organisations that look after particular other areas of the industry that don't understand the nuances of what we work in.
Also, another big point about that is it's one thing to pay someone $37 an hour, but what if they're only coming in for one tap class? So are they going to travel out for $37? I don't know. I think that's not inspiring, let's be honest. Like there needs to be a minimum call out as well. I'm not sure if I can't recall now, the fitness industry award, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 hours. What's the minimum there? I can't
I
remember.
think it's only one.
1 hour, right? Yeah, it's
And I
only
think it
one
used
hour. So you
to.
could be going out for $20 and that's it.
And it's ludicrous. And this is where you need to make sure that as a studio owner, you're doing some smart timetabling in your programs. So you say, look, I've got these particular classes, like, from 4 till 9 or 4 till 6. The other person's doing 6 to 8 or whatever it is. Because you need to put yourself in the shoes of the teacher going, well, I'm not going to come out for that. That's
for
absurd.
$27. But having said that, for a small studio, like if you're a studio of 100 students, like it's not always possible to give them multiple hours. So there should be a minimum call time like there is for any other job. If you go and work at Woolworths, I think it's like a 3 or 4 hour minimum, right? So there should be that. But then if you've got that time slot and they are available and you're paying them for 3 hours, that means that there are other things that they could be doing for the business. So
100%. You can do
yeah,
administration. You could be doing some sort of concert work, some planning. There's always work that can be done for teachers is not just standing in front of a child and teaching them a class.
yeah, absolutely.
But you obviously need to make sure that the teacher is open to that. If you say, look, I've only got the 2 hours for you doing these two classes, but then I've got another 2 hours of work. Is that okay if it's administration? And they go, it's fine, no problem. It's just having that dialogue with them to make sure that it's workable for them. The rate would be different depending on what they're doing. Obviously, you wouldn't pay someone the same rate as teaching and then, sorting some costumes and those sorts of things. But it's just making sure that you have a really solid plan as the studio owner, and looking at the way that the timetabling is done. And I say to people, sorry, go.
No, go for it.
I think for me, I would love for full-time studios to be able to run earlier and finish earlier. I said, because there's so many full-time students that would really benefit from working in the studio, but they can't get there until like 5:15, 5:30. And it's really hard to
Late.
yeah, it's really hard if you're starting in studios at 4. That sort of initial thing, the blocks usually go to someone else. So I'm all about investing in.
That's actually really an interesting point. You're absolutely right, because full-time students would love after-school teaching jobs, but they can't do them, and then they end up working in bars and restaurants.
Yeah, so we've got
so typical of the industry, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's just we'd love there to be some alignment from that journey from the training and education into that real sort of middle part of full time where you're doing training, but also you're gigging, you're doing teaching, you're doing stuff that's actually then preparing you for your career going forward. So we've got an elite manager who's incredible, and she works a lot with the full time students that are coming to assist her. So they understand and they learn about the teaching, but they're there to support the students as well. And it works really, really well. And we've got a whole lot of students that have done the training programs while like the leadership programs in the studio. And then when they finish, they're really great teachers as well. So it's just looking at ways that you sort of can bring everyone together, but also doing it in a way that they're all being paid their entitlements and they're getting what they need.
Yeah, I love that so much. That's such a great idea. You're a thinker. You're a thinker, Mike.
This is not just me that would have thought about that. Like I know a lot of studios would think these things all the time. But this is why we do a consultation. Is like we say to everyone, how can we make our industry better? This is what Dance Arts Alliance is all about, and sharing best practice and making sure that we have a really good future ahead of us.
I like it so much. So, okay, how can people support the mission?
So you can jump onto danceartsalliance.com.au. It's $120 a year, but as I said, every dollar of that goes back into supporting our industry, whether it's training and education, whether it's advocacy, whether it's doing marketing your studio, and it's any other work that you need done. So, we get a lot of people contacting us. We've got a Facebook group where people ask questions, and it's just providing that support in a space that it's very positive and it's very results focused and or solutions focused. It's about having a bit of a way that we can actually pull together to support all of our studios. And as I said, the more voices we have, the more change we can affect in government. So at the moment, if there's a couple of hundred studios going to government, we can say this is what we need. But imagine if we had 1,000 studios around Australia that are all pulling together.
How many studios are there in Australia? I've actually looked this up before, and then is it like 6,000, or am I dreaming?
There's probably around about 4,000 for the dance performing arts, the main sort of organisations, and then there's some smaller ones that do the adult classes and the silver swans, those sorts of things, and things like church hall or community hall focus. So there's a lot of those particular ones. But a lot of this data is actually out of date because a lot of it comes from pre-COVID. And we know that a lot of studios closed down. So it's an approximation. But imagine if we actually had an organisation like Dance Arts Alliance that has access to everyone to make sure that we have all the tools and supports that we need, but also that we have that work towards regulation to make sure that we have a safe industry. We all need to be held to account in all of the work we do. And it blows my mind that my 6-year-old can go into a business and someone hasn't got any qualifications or training. There's no organisation that Victoria is the only one with I think in New South Wales have mandatory standards, but there's no one really auditing those. The Commission for Children and Young People in Victoria have said we're not staffed to audit studios. We can just give them some tools and help to do that. So really, from a parent's perspective, it's either you call the police if your child's in need and not much else. So, we need to do better in our industry. And as I said before, we can't wait for more cases of grooming and assault to happen on children before we actually change.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think I've even had conversations with people thinking, hiring subleasing space of certain people that have someone actually that ended up being arrested for that very thing and going to jail. So I would never have imagined in a million years that person was doing that to kids. I mean, we can't always pick it, but when I think back on some of the practices, we could have done better. We could have done better in that sort of space. I think nothing happened to any of our kids. We were subleasing another studio, but there were times where that particular studio owner would say, "Oh, Joe, you guys can leave early. Your team can leave early. I'm happy to look after the kids." But he wasn't actually a part of our team. But because there was a relationship of trust, we'd be like, "Wow, that's so nice. Wow, okay." Because if a kid was being picked up late, but in hindsight, I'm thinking, no, that should never have happened. Like that was our responsibility. Like there's so many things, like we trust people so much, but there's got to be training around that. Like there's got to be rules around that, like I don't even think when you sublease a space, you check if they've got a working children's check.
Do you know the thing that's really difficult is that if a teacher is working with you, they need to be registering with you as an employer with working with children. So if their status changes, you get alerted to that. But any other teacher that's coming along doing a one-off masterclass, summer school program, they don't list you as an employer and they just show you their card. You can't check unless you have that number, what their status is. So there are people in our industry that have lost their working with children check, but we actually can't tell by going to working with children because it's an issue of privacy. But the thing I sort of say to government is like, well, if you've got a sex offenders register that you can make available for someone who's convicted of child sexual assault or grooming or whatever it is, why is it with working with children we don't have the access to that as employers? And this, again, is just this esoteric sort of industry that we don't have these controls on. And you can do 99 things right in your business, but that one thing that you miss, and it terrifies all of us as studio owners about having a child that is harmed in your care and you've done so much right. Then there are things out of your control that you don't have the tools to be able to make sure that you're doing due diligence and compliance checks on those people if you don't have access.
Well, it sounds like you're doing amazing work there at Dance Arts Alliance, obviously Academy of Dance, massive as well, over 1,000 students. And congratulations with Calibrate, your new business, or newest. I'd still call it a baby. It's only a year old, right?
I know, it's very jump off to calibratedance.com.au to look at what we're doing. And
I'll definitely put a link as well for everyone in the show notes. I'll put a link to Dance Alliance and to Calibrate so they can check you out. But before we go, I have a couple of quick questions to wrap, which I like to always ask my guests. And that is, who or what inspires you most?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question. I think for me, I've got a graphic design background. So for me, visual arts just inspire me all the time. So My favorite thing to do is I used to love going to galleries and then going to the shop afterwards and just going through and sort of, all the art books and photography and the sort of the visual stimulus I really love. And I love music. Like I've always got music on. It sort of calms me when things are really hectic and busy. And just having conversations, like every single conversation I have with a studio owner or a teacher, I come away because you find out a little bit more about what drives them and what they do. And as I said, I'm always on this learning journey, and I think I come away, I feel really energized talking to people. So today I'm really excited to talk to you. And then, I sort of go away from that going, it was a really positive experience.
Yeah, awesome.
It's a very broad answer for
I like it. What's your Spotify wrap up? Have you done it yet?
No. Mine would be like mortifyingly embarrassing. So a lot of my music sort of stuck in the 90s. But
that's cool.
But I don't have a band or a particular thing. I just like particular songs that come up. What I do love in Spotify and Apple Music is you think of a song, you go, I really want to listen to that. And then it just takes you on a journey. It'll just start playing all this other music that's related to that. I like the surprise of it rather than actually having an actual list.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's next for you? What's your next thing? What's happening?
So mainly it's Calibrate. This whole idea of being able to support the industry commercially in the work that we're doing, and obviously Dance Arts Alliance. I really feel that the whole adage of the people who plant the trees won't live long enough to actually be sitting under the shade of them. It's the same thing with Dance Arts Alliance. This is the start of a very long journey in making sure that we have the safest industry we can in Australia. And there are going to be people taking over and continuing this in years to come. But I just want to make sure that what we leave behind is the foundations of a really strong support to making sure that children and young people are always safe within our industry, and that we have successful businesses, that the studio owners and the teachers get paid fairly and actually get rewarded for what they do. Can you imagine actually having a future where you can safely and comfortably retire because you worked in a studio your whole life? That's what we need. And
like any other career, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And I know you mentioned it throughout the conversation, but where can people find you? So Dance Alliance, Calibrate, let's go. Where can people find you?
So danceartsalliance.com.au. Please have a look at that. And as I said, the more voices we have, the more that we can do and affect change. And for Calibrate, it's calibratedance.com.au. And drop me an email. I'd love to chat to you about how we can help you as a studio.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. You have been an awesome guest and so many insights. It's been fab.
Thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
This episode was brought to you by my signature group coaching program, Studio Biz Success, an amazing and accessible online educational platform for performing arts studio owners designed to help you grow your business with confidence and get your results. Check it out at josephinelancuba.com, along with other great industry resources to help you leap into the studio biz you deserve. If you love this episode, be sure to share it with your friends. You can tag me on social media at Josephine Lancuba and give it a review. Your support helps the show to grow so I can continue to provide you with useful, informative content. I'm Josephine Lancuba, your biggest cheerleader. Thanks for listening and shine bright.